Butts.
Well, hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm here with some of my Patreon patrons, as I always am once a month. So
and
we're
the
running,
dog,
and a dog, and a cat, and a truly magnificent mustache, my friend. I haven't complimented it on you.
Thank you. Welcome, embrace the mighty hash.
Yeah, I've been wearing a mustache since the 70s, and nobody said boo about it. Crying out loud.
The new baby gets all the attention.
Unfortunately, with the fedora as well, I look just like the rationals that H-Bomb made fun of in one old.
Oh my god! Yes.
No, you must take it back now.
Say it.
I'm rational.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking of shaving mine off just because, like, everyone has one now.
That would take that, you know.
Fedora, everyone has one now. No, this is a trivial. It's not a fedora. A trivial.
Billy.
You know, but Joe, that's. I mean, first I had to get used to Alex Trebek without a mustache, which took years. And then my father-in-law, who had a mustache for as long as I had known him since I was a kid, shaved his mustache. I had to get used to that. Now, if you shave yours, that's another one that I don't think I can handle this much change. I'm a white guy. I can't handle this much change.
Well, what's really funny when you just said that, like, I'm an RPG player, and one of the RPG things I'm on Facebook. Somebody had posted this thing where this guy who does RPG videos was complaining because Roll20, he was trying to get Roll20 to sponsor his some event he and some other guys were running, and Roll20 says, we don't need another 5 white guys, and he got all bent out of shape. And he's like, well, most of the people who play the games are white males. And it's like, right. That's why they want some other representation, you idiot.
Kind of like this room, too.
Yeah. Hi, by the way.
Hey, Susan.
Hi.
Oh, I don't say
welcome. Great to see you.
And you have a visitor, Lauren.
I do?
Behind you.
Yeah. Hang on.
Better go take care of it. So yeah, as Joe said right before we went on the air, not really much to talk about. Not a whole lot going on in the world the last week or so. I mean, I guess everybody's just been kind of keeping to themselves, working on their stamp collection, or certainly not getting incredibly angry at the news, or fighting back a creeping sense of existential dread.
Oh, God.
Yeah, we're trying to pick up which horror movies we're gonna watch next month.
Yeah, exactly, stuff like that. Yeah,
Jacob, seriously? I mean, a horror movie is playing out right now in Washington D.C.
Well, what I was talking about, there's a great horror movie coming out on October 2nd called The Trump Prophecy. It's going to be. I think it's.
Tell me you're not serious.
No, I am dead serious. There is a movie coming out titled The Trump Prophecy.
Oh, bloody hell!
There was some controversy about that in my town about a month ago. Because there was a billboard advertising, it may not be the same movie, but it was basically a movie bashing Trump. And on the sign, it says, Trump is an idiot. So there were people out there protesting the sign. Not a lot. There were like 3 or 4 at any given time. But it made the local news. And then, of course, my town had to be craven. Even though it's the town's run by the Democratic machine, they had to come out and be like, oh, well, that's just kind of like hate speech, and they should take it down. And then finally the billboard people took it down because they were tired of the bullshit. And then the town said, well, this is so good that it came down. I'm like, really? Are you out of your fucking minds?
Civility is important.
So calling
tolerating speech you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Calling an individual an idiot is hate speech.
Well, all the Trumps are idiots.
I know idiot is idiot is a troublesome term, but like insulting one person who is legitimately an asshole.
Like, no, he said Trump, so it applies to the entire bloodline. It's a genocide.
What has he when has he ever given a speech and not had something that would qualify under that definition. You know, if insulting somebody is hate speech, then I don't think he's made a speech that hasn't.
About the only time is when he reads off the teleprompter and somebody else wrote it.
He's done that?
You know, my favorite part of that, you can always tell when Trump is reading off the teleprompter because he can't help but add his own like pointless little flourishes where like he'll get to the end of a paragraph and then he'll go, so true, so true. It's like, you know, you're not supposed to be reading it, right? You're supposed to be delivering it like you're really saying it. It's not like, you know, he's reading a poem and he's like, wasn't that good? Like, it's just,
who big ups their own sentences.
Yeah, that was a really good point I just made.
I wonder if anyone's actually gone through and through Trump's tweets and figured out how many actually, you know, violate the code of conduct. Like what percentage?
I mean, bet someone has done that.
It's got to be there. It has to be more than a few. I mean, well, you know, he gave that speech. He gave that he had that rally last night. It was too late for me to include it in my Facepalm 5 video tomorrow because the video was pretty much done by the time he did it. But that's why I say not a complete list because you never know when he'll say some shit and it's too late for me to put it in. Where he said that, people were sharing screen caps of it, and it was like, okay, that's fake though, right? When he said me and Kim Jong-un fell in love.
Yeah,
he actually said that about a dictator of an autocratic dictator. I mean,
well,
he's like,
of course. Is there any other kind
he loves
of dictator?
One of them democratic dictators.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw Bill Maher on Friday, but I mean, somebody transcribed his last new rule, which basically is comparing Trump and a whole bunch of other autarchs to Yahweh. And he's got a lovely line in here. It says here, here we go. 4 spots on the list of the 10 commandments go to variations of stroke my ego and kiss my ass. There are only 2 people I can think of who would do that. God and Donald Trump.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, even when the assembled General Assembly of the United Nations laughed in his face at his own bullshit. Like he came back afterwards and said, "Well, I wanted to get a laugh."
Well, at least he didn't like declare any kind of like war on any other nation, and sort of declare he's going to like bomb any place and stuff like that, like he did last year, right?
But I mean, he's like the kind of a guy, like if he's not looking where he's going and he sits down on the couch and sits on the cat and kills it, he'll be like, "Oh, I meant to do that. I hated that cat."
No, not the cat.
The cat committed suicide.
Why'd we even have a cat? I don't like cats.
The kill the cat moment and the kill the cat moment or the kick the dog moment in the movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true. It's like, what was it? I forget the name of the movie, but it was Kiefer Sutherland and Sally Field, and Kiefer Sutherland plays like this fucking absolutely evil bastard who's like a murderer and a rapist and everything, But to prove that he's really bad, they have a scene where he pours a cup of hot coffee out on a dog.
No, it's not.
It's like, oh, okay, now I know he's evil.
With Reese Witherspoon?
No. What was it called? It was in the early '90s. It was him and Sally Field, and she played the mother of a child that he had killed, I think, and she like was after him for revenge.
Yeah.
Just a really just an awesome cheesy bad movie. I forget what it was called. But yeah,
he's eating bushes.
What gets me the most about him is not so much him; it's his Eye for an Eye. Is the name of the movie.
Oh yeah.
But the thing that gets me most about his cults basically, is that they think part of the things that they love about him, they think he's so strong because he talks tough, and I'm like, I've never seen a more insecure human being in my life, and I'm the second most insecure human being that I know of.
But these people have their own custom reality. That's the problem.
I mean, my self-esteem has actually gone up because I realize I'm not that fucked up.
Yeah. At least I have some confidence.
Oh yeah. If you compare yourself to someone else, you can always maybe find someone in the worst opposition as is.
But it's like, well, it's what the custom reality thing. I mean, at that rally in West Virginia last night, he said he mentioned him talking to the United Nations where he was laughed at, and he said the rest of the world is taking America seriously again. And that got applause. Like, those people believed it. It's like it was on TV for the entire world to see that he put out his typical, most successful president ever bullshit, and everybody laughed at him. And he still went back to his base and said, now they really take us seriously, and they completely buy it. It makes no difference to them.
These are people who, these are people who, if they ever watched NPR or BBC News or anything like that, would probably lose their shit 3 ways from Sunday.
Or just content as fake news, or it's always the liberal media. They always, that they're going to lie.
Yeah, so the liberal media in other countries. Like, what do you really think the BBC is that invested in lying and making shit up about the American president?
Well,
yes.
Well, the funny thing is, they even interviewed some of the diplomats, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we were totally laughing at him."
Yeah,
not even a question.
Yeah, because it's horseshit. Like, it's a laughable line. It's not a, when a guy who hasn't accomplished anything other than a few human rights atrocities comes out and
the
has
world's worst tax bill.
The world's worst tax bill. And by the way, like getting 400,000 people in America to lose their jobs because of his tariffs, and having to pass a separate farm aid bill to reimburse farmers who are losing money because of his tariffs.
And that's an accomplishment. They're fucked up.
Yeah. That's an accomplishment, I guess.
I don't think he understands that tariffs, we pay them, not the other countries.
Yeah. Well, his
he doesn't want anybody else to get that either.
Yeah, his finance guy, his trade guy, according to last week's Tonight John Oliver, it was the guy who wrote a book that his son Jared just went to Amazon and typed in trade big book or trade guy, and the first result was the author that became Trump's trade guy.
Yeah.
Guys, I really like him. I really like how he talks. I really like how he makes deals. I think he's great. He'd be huge.
And of course, the guy is a kook. Like, his ideas are completely rejected by the mainstream of economists. So that's the guy who's advising the president.
Well, then he'd be right at home in the rest of the cabinet.
Just because what pisses me off the most about that is that, first off, because obviously his cult believes it, even though, and I had the arguments with them, but okay, Republicans in Congress, for the most part, know that shit's false, and they actually oppose the tariffs because it actually goes against right wing, economic philosophy.
So, I mean, how can you enslave brown people if you impose tariffs? It doesn't work.
So the thing is, exactly. So he's like, so that's what but the fact that even though they are against it, they still go along with it. Like, dude, you guys have been against tariffs. I remember when I was a kid and Jimmy Carter wanted to raise tariffs, and there was a big fight. The Republicans were a minority in both the House and the Senate, but it was a big thing. And they totally have thrown that over. They basically, they don't even believe in what they believe in anymore. They just follow him.
Yeah,
well, Mitch McConnell said that they would hold off the Supreme Court nomination, the Obama one, to put on the Supreme Court for 287 days, 8 months. He said the election's coming up, let the people decide, and now they're rushing through with Brett Kavanaugh.
Because they don't actually believe any of that. He didn't believe it when he said it the first time.
Because they're afraid that the people may decide.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that the other day, and I was thinking about the Kavanaugh thing and how they're still going to vote to confirm him no matter what. I mean, and I thought, this level of commitment, even though it's for a completely evil cause, that's why the Republicans are able to win, because Republicans they're more willing to hold their nose and vote for someone with an R after their name than Democrats are, because Democrats are more likely to say, well, but I wish they would have nominated a more progressive candidate. I wish they would have nominated a more leftist person. I'll vote for the Green Party this time, or I won't vote for the president. And Republicans, I don't think, have as much of that problem.
No,
I think that they'll piss and moan about how, I wish they'd nominate a real conservative. But when it comes to election time, they'll show up and they'll vote for their guy, no matter who.
Who else can they vote for? Who else can they vote for?
And it's not even a matter of holding their nose. I mean, all you had to do is see what was going on Thursday afternoon with Lindsey Graham, with John Cornyn, with that whole list of idiot children basically going off, like a sausage party at a testosterone fest.
I thought
of me, Susan, but I mean, it's
they're highly intelligent assholes.
I saw a Twitter thread that Natalie Alford tweeted out, and where it's just like Brett Kavanaugh and all those Republican senators, they're so emotionally invested in their position because they're aristocrats. They're fighting for the aristocratic privilege of power, essentially.
It's not even aristocratic; it's white male.
Yeah.
Well, aristocrats, white males,
go to the right schools, and they do the right things.
Well, here's the thing, though. What I'm hoping, and what Steve said is really important. And so I would hope on the left. I know we have differences, like you said, and that's
we always have differences on the left.
And that's one of the things that's kind of funny. Obviously we say there's strength in diversity, and there is, but we don't live that way. So basically, that's the problem. See, on the right wing, it is all pretty much a fairly homogeneous group, and on the left, we have all these competing interests and all this diversity. We don't agree, and so when we don't agree, instead of figuring out what's going to be the most, what's the lowest common denominator at least, and go with that. Start with that. We fight each other, and so. But I would hope at this point, could we please dispense with this bullshit notion that both parties are the same? The Democrats have a lot of fucking problems, but the idea that we would get just as bad a result out of them, out of this evil cabal. The RNC I actually call now the Rapist Normalization Cabal. That's what the stands for.
Yeah. Well, I'm feeling a lot of that here in Maryland because we have the Democrat running for our governor this time. Ben Jealous. To me, he's a pretty good candidate, and I voted for him in the primary, and I'm glad that he got the nomination, and I'm going to vote for him in the general. But I know he's not quite as. It's weird for some people, he's not progressive enough. For other people, for more centrist, a lot of
people that's not progressive enough but American politics.
But for more centrist Democrats, which we have a lot of here in Maryland, he's too progressive. He's too far to the left. And there are a lot of Democrats who are going to vote for the Republican, for the incumbent, Larry Hogan.
Well, for crying out loud.
Because he's a moderate Republican, because, blah, blah, blah. And it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know how to explain to people who still don't get it at this point, that if you don't get why it's better to have a Democrat in that office than a Republican, especially in this day and age, in this environment, why you think you don't think it would be better to have at the very least a governor who will veto bills passed by a Republican legislature, which to me a lot of people forget about that. Like the governor, the executive doesn't always set the agenda 100% of the time. It really helps.
They can't make wrongs, but they can block things.
It really helps to have, if you have a state legislature that is Republican controlled, which Maryland doesn't have. We still have Democratic majorities in both of our houses of the legislature, but it keeps the Republican percentage keeps rising, and who knows, in another couple of election cycles, if the trend continues, they might take over. And if you don't see why it would be a good idea to have someone in the executive office who can block their bills, then I don't know what to say to you.
It's a check on the balance of power of the legislature. Go ahead, Jacob.
I was just going to say that's really what over the last 4 years, that's what Tom Wolf has been in Pennsylvania. Because we have a heavily Republican legislature. We always have for a long time here, and really he's pretty much. He's had to set up against several anti-abortion bills, several anti-woman bills, and I respect that he's been able to stand up, and especially since Pennsylvania went to Trump.
Yeah,
and he's running against a candidate this year who's essentially another Donald Trump.
Yeah,
and I'm really, really worried about how this election is going to go down, because if Scott Wagner wins, Pennsylvania's fucked.
Hopefully the redistricting will help, but But that's another thing too. We, the same people who will bitch about on the left who will bitch about the gerrymandering, and then they don't do anything about voting in their own state to keep and it's like, well, you're well, and also the other thing too, what you said, Steve, about people, centrist Democrats voting for Hogan. It also belies then what I've been trying to tell people on the far left who are like, well, we didn't feel obligated to vote for Hillary because blah blah blah. She wasn't, but if Bernie was a candidate, then the centrist Democrats would have voted for Bernie. I'm like, See, this.
Well, I would hope they would, but see, you're right with like the centrist.
Probably, but you never know how many of them. How many?
I would have voted for Bernie in a New York second.
Me too, but not far left.
I would have too, but again, obviously there are Democrats who are not right and wouldn't make that calculation. So
there's probably a lot of like people who still kind of have this. You don't understand socialism or communism, and don't understand other far left ideologies, and like just don't want that either because maybe because they, despite the fact that they say they're centrist Democrats, maybe they kind of like lean more right than they.
The thing is, a centrist Democrat may not like the stuff that's on the far left, but that's what I try to say to people on the far left is that, hey, they don't agree with you, you don't agree with them, so maybe try to find something in between that you can both live with.
But what if there's not even much in between that we can't even agree with? Because maybe because
centrists are very comfortable with the far right.
Actually right on political spectrum than we like to think, because this country is far right as it is, as it's vehemently.
I don't care how I really don't care how we rate compared to the rest of the world. I'm talking about the reality here in the United States. So we have to deal with what we have.
The reality is we are a far right country.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what. Part of dealing with where we are right now. Anybody here doesn't know the term the Overton window?
I know the term. That's my problem.
Because
explain it for the audience, just in case.
Yeah, basically, it's the whole idea of what quote normal feels like to a given situation and how to move that normal. That normal is the Overton window, and what we have to do, plain and simple, is move the Overton window very slowly, very surely, but very methodically to the left.
Agreed.
But if there's a possibility, I can yank it over to the left. But that's the thing.
Real quick. That's.
Yeah, the problem is the Overton window doesn't move that quickly,
right.
And if you can move it that quickly, say you want a revolution.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Listen.
I want to address what you random guy's trying to say, because you know what? This idea of revolution is horseshit. This idea that revolution comes and everything's nice the next day is bullshit.
I understand that.
Pick up a fucking book.
Yeah.
No, don't fucking filibuster me, because this is fucking important, man.
Yeah. Revolution is 52 card pickup.
Look at the French Revolution. They had revolution after revolution. It took 81 years to get a stable government. Look at what happened in Russia. Look what happened in China. It's not going to be what you think, because it never is.
No shit.
That reminds me, since somebody brought it up.
Took,
sorry, go ahead. Say that again, Susan.
Even here in the U.S., it took like 15 years for us to actually have a constitution.
Right. Stable government, yeah.
True. Yeah.
But then again, our government was a new government until it was an experiment. So, how come we're not interested in experimenting with governments now? And it also, it happened.
We had a civil war.
It happened still, but we won that. It's always a work in progress. It's always a work in progress. It's just a work in progress.
I will say this:
is a work in progress.
I will say this. I don't have a problem with people who call for revolution as long as they continue to participate in the current system until they're ready to start the revolution. I saw Keith Lowell Jensen tweeted something the other day that I thought that summed up how I feel about it pretty clearly. He said, if you are not willing to participate in the current system in ways that will be helpful, then just go ahead and start your revolution. Like don't say, well, I'm not going to vote, we need a revolution, and then just sit there and do nothing. If you think it's gotten to that point, then by all means start your revolution.
But here's what I'll bring up: midterms. What if we get hacked in the midterms, and what if that blue wave doesn't come? That's where that's what I'm thinking. I'm kind of am mentally preparing myself for that possibility.
Yeah, a couple of things there. Number one, keep in mind the voting system itself has yet to be hacked, and it's almost impossible to hack. Now, the social media, way separate matter. Facebook is still vulnerable as hell. Whole 9 yards as it comes to that. And I just lost my other point. So,
our voting machines, for some reason, are internet accessible, which is always, I have no idea why. So our voting system could be hacked in a number of places.
And plus, it's decentralized as well. So it's like, well, some places may be rejected, other states, including swing states,
that actually makes it harder. The fact that it's decentralized makes it harder to run on a grand scale.
Exactly.
Well, on the grand scale, yes.
Yeah, but that's
they could just focus on battleground states.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and what Steve said, that quote is Keith Lowell Jensen is brilliant. And the thing is, it's important to understand too. Societal change has always been slow because it kind of has to be. And I was trying to explain this to Bionic Dance a while back. The thing is that, and I see this in engineering, and actually, being in automation and controls. There's always this fight, that we always have with end users, that they want a system to react fast. Fast is all they care about. Fast.
Right.
But what we really care about is stability. So you want the system has to be able to correct and it has to adjust. And if you make the system too overly responsive, it actually becomes
it more unstable.
Right. So what you want is something that's robust, that will react to necessary changes in a timely fashion, but because you're gonna overcorrect and you're gonna have to swing down, and you're eventually gonna hone in on the right value, but that takes time, and it's frustrating because we're humans and we don't like to wait because our lives are finite.
Okay.
Well, some people, they even for a stable change, slow incremental change, that is too slow for some people. There are people that are living in poverty right now that are not going to wait or just maybe we'll pass UBI, universal basic income. Maybe we will pass single payer health care. There are people that are begging for money online now. I'm financially helping someone who has to beg for money every week and stuff like that. And yet the change is slow, but yet it feels so slow for some people. That's why they rather revolutionize.
Okay, I'd like to make a point in the midst of all this, in addition to what Joe said about the whole issue of change. And this is a pet thing that I learned from dynamic systems. Joe, you ever take dynamic systems?
Yeah.
Yeah, well then you know about this one, because anytime you're dealing with a dynamic system and you're dealing with a system that changes states, there are two different solutions you have to come up with. The first is the steady state solution, but the way more difficult one is the transient solution. And transient, of course, means change. And if you're going to have an issue, with the rate of change, the faster the rate of change, the more difficult that solution is going to be. And unfortunately, there's no getting around it.
Right. Well, that's the thing, because I get what Random Guy's point is that obviously people suffer and we want to reduce suffering. And I'm totally with you on that. But the problem is that change, like just if you actually just look at all the revolutions in South and Central America, when what happens is when it happens too fast. There's these issues are not simple. It's very easy to say, let's have a single payer. Hey, I'm completely on board with a single payer. But how and the best single payer system, because that we could write, will have tons of flaws first go around, and we're going to have to fix it, and it's going to cause some pain. Maybe not to the people. Maybe it'll solve certain people's pain, but it's going to cause some other pain.
And the big question is, how do you make that transition?
Right.
But even if there is going to be pain.
Yeah, exactly.
Besides, even I understand there's going to be pain, and also it takes like 40 times before like the guy came him up with the WD-40 and Thomas Edison, and like supposedly tried 105 times before he got the incandescent light bulb, and just said like I found 105 ways not to make an incandescent light bulb. So yeah, that's kind of where I am.
That's why I decided.
You can't really judge by South American revolutions because they had to deal with the U.S., which is something we wouldn't have to deal with in the same way.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I think one of the things.
Capitalism.
One of the things about what some random geek was saying that strikes me about like people who need help urgently right now. There are, I think the frustrating thing about that is there are things that we can do right now within the current system to help people, or at least to make things better, that we're not doing. That wouldn't require a revolution or even like transformative change in the current system. We could pass a living wage next week.
Sure.
We could increase benefit. We could increase public benefits next week. We could increase funding to education next week. We could make healthcare more affordable. Like all of those things might have unforeseen complications that we then have to deal with.
Or reform all those things. And stuff like that.
But so there are things within the current system that we could do that would at least improve the present situation while we're waiting for the more transformative change to take hold that we're just not doing. And when we talk about, well, there's a difference between the two major parties. I mean, we have one major party that is in support of those things, that wants to make those changes in the current system, and another side that is absolutely dead set against it, that will not let any of that happen, that treats even the idea of passing a living wage for people as some kind of, threat to our civilization.
Yeah, it's anathema to them.
It's a threat to their wallets.
Oh yeah, but which in their minds, I guess, is the same thing.
Power.
It's the bottom line.
It's threat to their power, and so they'll fight dirty and nastily because they don't want to give up their power.
Well, and that's the reason why I've reached a point where the people that are on the far left that are not participating will complain and then complain. I have visceral hatred for them. I literally do, because basically, if you look what happened, and it's not just about Hillary and Bernie. Look what happened in the Senate. The Democrats had a chance to take as many as 53 seats in the Senate. All this shit that's going on with Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, all that stuff, all would have been completely different if the Democrats held the Senate. Forget Hillary. Even if Trump was president, if the Democrats had the Senate, we would
Kavanaugh never would have been nominated.
We would be in much better shape right now. But basically, what happened is the people who said, I can't wait for that change to happen, basically said we're willing to allow not only not to get the change they wanted, but to allow the system to actually be unraveled and to lose ground. Yeah. And then some of them are still like trying to rationalize this bullshit, like they're engaging in some sort of intelligent political activity. I mean, I really they're horrible. They're really
it's the little red hen model. Everybody wants to eat the bread, but nobody wants to help bake it. I mean, it's simplistic, but tell me it's not on point.
No, I'm willing to help to bake the bread. I read The Conquest of Bread by Peter Kropotkin.
But Joe, we've talked. I know
you are the absolute epitome of bread.
But Joe, I remember me and you. We've talked about this before. I think we had a hangout about this at one point where. If you want 100% and the best you can get is 75%, like that sucks, but you have to take the 75. You can't just say, well, if I can't have 100, I'll take 0. Yeah. You have to take the 75.
Going up a flight of stairs means taking one step at a time. Yeah. Hello.
And then when you get your 75, you have to keep fighting.
Up sometimes.
You have to keep fighting for the other 25. You can't just say, well, we got 75, we're good. Right. You have to keep going, but you can't just say, well, if I can have 100, then the hell with it, I'm going home. Then you're never going to get what you say you want.
Well, and exactly what gets me, and we talked before about privilege, and this is maybe the part that makes me extra angry. More white millennials voted for Trump than Hillary.
Yeah.
Now it wasn't. Now there was, because the rest voted for
other ones that voted.
So basically, the people that supposedly care about social justice, supposedly care about women's rights, LGBT rights, minority rights, all this kind of stuff, but to get a privilege, because why? Because the people who are the least likely to be affected by the horribleness, basically said, "Fuck it, I'd rather, if I can't get my way, I'll take 0," because they weren't because 0 wasn't going to hurt them as bad. They didn't care.
Or maybe the white millennials are not the majority in favor of social justice. That's kind of like what I said. Of the people who voted, and let's not forget that.
Yeah.
Well, it was Hillary and Trump, so there's a lot of people who did not participate. And plus, also, in a lot of states, sometimes it's always already determined before you went to the polls.
Yeah. Or there's also the possibility that within their own group, they feel as though it's sufficiently egalitarian that they don't have to worry about it, and they just said, yeah, and they're not conscious of what's going on outside of their own little bubble.
Well, especially in the 2016 one, we all thought that like it was Hillary going to win in 2016 specifically.
Yeah.
So
you know, I just watched. We just on Netflix just watched the last year's season of American Horror Story. Which was
that too.
Yeah, which was about the election. It had a lot of Trump stuff in it, and about a guy who like starts a cult in his hometown as a result of the election, and is very like the villain is very pro-Trump. And a lot of it is really goofy and out there and over the top, like American Horror Story is. But there are a couple of points a couple of observations that it makes about the election and what allowed it to happen that I think are absolutely spot on. And one of them is when the main guy, the cult leader, says, he basically says, you know, well, one of the big reasons why a lot of people voted for Trump was that they just wanted to say, fuck you. To other people. They felt like they had been ignored, they had been, you know, vilified or whatever, and Trump was their chance to say, hey, fuck you. And they didn't even necessarily expect him to win. It turned out there were enough of them that he did win, but they just it was their way of giving everybody else the finger and saying, oh yeah, well, fuck you. And there's still a lot of that. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many people are still supporting Trump. Because they're in that mindset of, yeah, well, he's our guy and you don't like him, so I like him and fuck you. And I don't know, there's no way to beat that other than just showing up in larger numbers than them on election day.
Hopefully there's larger numbers of us.
No, I've seen The Dark Knight, Batman, the second Chris Nolan movie, where they told the Joker to go fuck himself and they threw the bomb out the window. I say we throw the Trump out a window.
Well, that could be Batman can try. Batman can try to save it, but miss. Oops, sorry.
Well, here's one other thing too about that, you know, how much time it takes and how that change and that delay can be painful. All right, so the Civil War ends in 1865.
Yeah,
it's 2018, so what, 145 years, 155 years, whatever. I still have to worry about getting shot because I have a taillight out.
Yeah.
So
well, I guess that makes sense.
Why when people tell me, "Oh, it's taking too long," I really want to say, "Fuck you, asshole," because again, it's usually white people, and like I have to worry. I got pulled over because I had a tail light out, and the cop came up to my car with his hand on his gun with the snap off.
Yeah.
So the fact that some people, you know, hey, I'm more than happy to pay more taxes. I'm a business owner. I make good money. I'm more than happy. I'm with you on all the stuff. I want to help all the people. But when you let me down and you say, fuck you, Joe, I'm going to let all these things go away because things aren't going as fast as I'd like. Well, I'd like to be able to drive down a fucking road and not have to worry about I'm going to die today because it's a literal, real thing.
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to my dad earlier, and my dad is mostly sort of conservative in his politics. Like he's not super interested in politics, but when we have political discussions, he usually falls on the more on the right side. But the only political thing we talked about today was him talking about how fucked up he thinks it is that Jeff Bezos has all that money and people who work for Amazon still have to apply for benefits to make ends meet. So there is, I mean, among certain people, and I have my dad didn't vote for Trump. He didn't like Trump, but ideologically speaking, he's probably more aligned with that side than the other side. But even for folks like, but even for folks,
a right-wing Democrat.
But even for folks like that, I mean, especially people who have been working class for most of their lives, who know what it's like to have to sweat for a paycheck. Like there's an awareness, I think, or at least a potential awareness among a lot of people like that, of how unfair a lot of especially the economic inequalities are, who just instinctively get that it's wrong for someone to have hundreds of billions of dollars in the bank and employ people and not pay them living wages. Like they just get that that's wrong. And if that can be tapped, like if the Democratic Party can mobilize that and say, you know, if you are as offended by that and outraged by that as we think you are, then we have something for you.
Yeah.
You know, everybody always says like it's economics, it's economic issues. It was economic anxiety that drove people to Trump. Well, if you think that Trump is on the side of the workers in that equation, you're out to lunch. There's no fucking way. Trump is on the side of the rich guy who wants to keep all his money.
Because he's a rich guy who wants to keep all his money.
So if you see stories like that and you think like, God, that's fucked up. People who work for Walmart don't even make enough money to pay their bills, and that family is worth like $200 billion between them. Well, then here's who you need to vote for.
I have debt. I'm thinking of getting a second job just so like I can also help my friend who lives on Social Security income, but it also has like a couple of medical conditions and has to like pay $60 each week for a new batch of pain medications on copays. And so because she just does not get enough because she just cannot work. Yeah. And that's what some established Democrats will say. It's unfair for someone who works 40 hours a week to not get full health care benefits. I say it's unfair for anyone not to get full health care.
Yeah, they need to drop that qualifier.
And here's something else. I mean, 80, 90 years ago, when Henry Ford was, getting started with the Model T and everything else, Ford was a son of a bitch. Make no mistake about it. But he also priced the Model T so that the average guy could afford it.
Right, because he understood economics.
Exactly, and he also understood, how to keep his people, make what they build available to the very people who build it.
Plus the fact he also understood too the fact that since they were driving Ford cars that they built, they were invested in the quality of that product.
Never mind the fact that they were actually advertising that product in buying them.
Right. See, that's one thing. I'm as most of you guys know, I have a business. And here's one fucked up thing. I paid, my wife and I paid 6 figures in taxes last year. I have no complaints about that, but we paid more than GE, and I do have a complaint about that.
Yeah.
No shit. And this gets about the ratio between what the CEO of the company makes and what the average Joe in the company makes. And in the United States, it is through the freaking roof. Yeah. I mean, what is it, like something like 200 to 1 or more?
Yeah, it's crazy.
More like 491.
Yeah, that's about right, Jacob. Thanks.
But so the thing is, but and it's funny because being a liberal business person, and I understand this, and I try to I want to have have equitable things and do things for my employees. But it seems like I don't know. It seems like the right wing, they've forgotten how all this system is supposed to work.
Well, in my opinion, capitalism doesn't work anyway. But that's my opinion.
No. Capitalism. Well, capitalism is a monetary system, and it works fairly well. The problem is it's not a political system, nor is it a religion, but it's being treated as one.
Well, regulated capitalism works. Unregulated capitalism leads to exactly what we've got right now and only gets worse from there.
Well, it's unsustainable because what's going to happen is eventually all the wealth will be held by too few people, and growth in a capitalist system is dependent on the exchange of money. And so if nobody has any money to buy the damn products, the whole system collapses.
Yeah, I think,
which is why they created credit, which is why they created debt in the 70s.
It's one of the most It's one of the most frustrating things when you try to talk to sort of more right-wing people about stuff like this, because especially older people who they love to go on about the good old days and things aren't like the way they used to, and things are so expensive now and blah blah blah. And you want to say, those post-war years in the 50s and 60s when the economy was really strong and when everybody was making good money and you could afford to take a vacation and have a car and send your kids to school on one income, like, that's the economic conditions and the economic policies that were in place back then are kind of close to what Democrats want to have now, right? And that we want to have stronger labor unions so that if people do get a job, they'll have benefits, they'll have fair wages, like all of these things that enabled that economic golden age in the post-war years. Not to mention thousands of veterans coming home and getting subsidized education, so that there was a whole generation of college-educated people who, gave birth to the United States in the 50s and 60s that everybody's so nostalgic for. I mean, it's so frustrating when you think, okay, when we put your economic policies into place in the 80s, everything went to shit, but those are the ones that you want to keep going with to bring back the good old days.
Well,
not the ones from the 40s and 50s that created the.
Steve, that's trickle down, which is supposed to work. Meanwhile, you want to level the playing field, you naughty boy. Shame on you.
Maximum wage. Let's just get maximum wage above a certain wage. All of that you earn get taxed and then goes down into the services.
That's what the 91% tax rate was about.
Right.
At the upper level, basically the idea was that you can make as much money as you want, but past a certain point, we're going to take most of it away. And it wasn't really to get the taxes. What it was basically is you say, okay, look, we're going to take 91 cents out of that buck. You're really not going to get much out of it. But you know what? If you give it to your workers,
right,
they're going to pay a lower rate. So there's fewer tax dollars coming into the federal coffers, but you're spreading the money out a little bit better. And so it drives the economy.
And you're putting money in
work though.
And you're putting money into their hands, which they can spend, and like you say, stimulate the economy.
There's a guy, one of my vendors. We do business together, and he's not a far right guy, but he definitely leans to the right. A lot of business people do because again they don't understand economics. And
they understand greed.
Yeah. So it's not even small businesses is not necessarily greed. They just because the problem is right wing thinking. It's simplistic, so it's intuitive. It sounds right, but it's wrong. It doesn't work.
And that's a human problem that I don't know how we can fix.
That's very, very difficult and that's the reason why they're really good at taglines and we're not, because our ideas require subtlety and nuance, and it's hard to button that up into a slogan.
It's easier to lie as well as opposed to tell the truth.
So guy, this vendor I got to work with, so he was complaining because in New Jersey we passed a law here now for people who work, I think over 30 hours, something like that. You have to provide 5 sick days a year, and it's prorated and all this. So he was bitching to me a little bit about it, and I said, well, and how, and he was asking me how I was affected. I'm like, not at all. I already give 6. And he was stunned, and I was like, well, first off, people that are sick don't produce very much, so them coming to the office is pointless. Because what are they going to do? They're maybe I'll get 2 hours of work. And in fact, I remember saw a thing that says out of an 8-hour day, the average person only puts in about 4 or 5 anyway. So if there's and that's on a good day, unless they're rocking and rolling. So normally so why get the 2 hours? So it's a plus effect. They're going to come in and spread their germs and make everybody else sick, and then now I got other people out. So he said, well, don't people abuse it? I said, no, actually they haven't. I've thought they might, and I said, if someone does, fire them. Really, that's how you hire decent people. They're going to, and you treat them well. They're going to want to come in, and then they're not going to want to use up their sick days. In fact, I said the other thing I did as an incentive. I said, well, if you get your sick days, for every 3 you don't use, I'll pay you a day if you don't use them. So there's an incentive not to, you get a little extra money in your pocket, So it hasn't been abused. And he was like, oh, wow, really? So then I think I kind of changed his mind, because he had these, because everything in right wing philosophy is based on fear and greed. And when I said, no, that the things you're afraid of don't happen, or at least it hasn't happened in my case. And then he was like, oh, okay. He kind of came around.
But unfortunately, that is a slim majority of people do that, because about 40% of the time that doesn't work, according to the studies that was mentioned in the Vox video. So if it does work sometimes it just doesn't, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, it depends on the size of the company.
Yeah, that's true. It does. I think what Joe was saying earlier about how capitalism is a monetary system, not like a government, and I think that's one of the big problems with it, is that since the 50s, since the 40s, since even before that, really, for almost the entirety of this country's history, we've been conditioning people to see everything in terms of profit and loss, and everything in terms of everything is transactional. And when you look at someone like Trump, that is the embodiment of what happens when you internalize that. Everything to him is transactional. It's what can I get from you, and what do I have to let go of in order to get you to give me what I want. There's no humanity. There's no there's no presumption of any sort of reciprocity or mutuality. And it's all just, you know, it's a transaction.
And it's not just transactional, it's zero sum.
Yeah.
There's winners, there's losers, there's a limited pool, and that's it.
That's an epiphany I had. It's a dog-eat-dog world because we all grew up in capitalism. It was forced onto us. We did not vote for it in the 1700s when we went from feudalism to capitalism, and we were all born into it. So we were forced to participate into it, where you have to work in order to live, and yet there are people who can't work.
Well, again, it's not about it's really truly not about capitalism. It really is, and I know you think it is.
I think it is.
But well,
it's tied because the entire world operates under capitalism.
Again,
we have forced capitalism onto other countries like in Iraq.
The economies of social democratic Europe are capitalist.
Yes, they are.
So the idea that capitalism is the problem is obvious, is demonstrably bullshit. Okay, so. The fact that we are not regulating capitalism. In fact, the whole idea that what I said before, right wingers don't really believe what they think they believe. Okay, think about the principle of non-aggression. Everything that you do that harms somebody else is under that principle is violence or force.
Yeah.
So regulation is to prevent me. If I'm a manufacturer and I'm putting out pollution, and I think we might have probably talked about this before. That is force against everybody else. So you have the right to regulate that because I'm exuding force against you, so I have to be responsible for that. But they don't actually act like that's true. They don't really believe it. It's really about not taking responsibility for themselves, and that's the thing that pisses me off.
Yeah.
So if we had proper regulation, you can have a good social democratic government and a capitalist economic system. Because basically they're doing different things. There's nothing we've yet to have a system that generates wealth better than the capitalist economic system. But
why do we need to generate wealth? Period.
Well, we actually
question that.
That's how you clothe and feed people.
We can all work together cooperatively.
Everything behind you in your book, your books, your hat, those are wealth. Every possession you have is wealth.
That can be spread across everyone.
That's not how they do it in Star Trek, Joe.
Yeah, but
they're at least scarcity.
In Star Trek, they're motivated to improve themselves and to be self-sufficient, at least to a certain degree. And if that was a universal standard and equality, it'd be great.
Right.
Not happening now. Not happening in the near future.
Well, I think that would be
in the near future.
That would be an example of one of the long-term changes that maybe we should be working toward. You know what I mean? Like, that's not. I mean, it's such a drastic change that they don't even tell you how it happened in Star Trek. In the made up sci-fi story, like, say, how did we transition to a money-free economy?
Well, that's my Babylon 5 is theory.
Well, it might have. I think this would have gone through end of World War III, where there were basically no governments left.
Yeah.
And no governments need no currencies. So
let's just keep it this way.
Yeah.
Let's just be cool to each other.
Contact, the Vulcans gave them replicator technology.
Well, you know what's interesting,
which didn't show up until the next generation,
right? Well, you know what's interesting is like in the original series, they were still using money, at least in some form, because you hear people talk about like credits and stuff, and so it's like the change to a moneyless economy happened like between Kirk and Picard at some point, to the point where it was very well established by the time Next Generation starts, where everybody just sort of assumes that's the way it is. So it's like, damn, something must have happened in those 100 years.
Yeah, I mean,
I can explain like how labor vouchers work in like an anarcho society or social society, where you have you work your job, you produce labor of some kind, you get your labor vouchers. You want to buy a teddy bear, a luxury item, not a necessity. Well, maybe a necessity for like leisure, but a minimal necessity or a mild necessity, not a major one. And so you turn your labor vouchers and you get the teddy bear. The thing is, the vendor who like does their own labor of like running the store, when they take your labor vouchers for that teddy bear, he doesn't get to keep the labor vouchers and then use it to buy whatever else. No, those labor vouchers basically just disappear.
Right.
And he earns their own currency.
Yes. So maybe that's what they're talking about when they say credits. And I'm sure the writers of Star Trek thought it out to that point.
Yeah. See, the thing is, though, I mean, that's literally what they did in the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And So
the Soviet Union was like a state capitalist because it was a government that like controls everything and has things behind a wall and stuff like that. So whenever you point to the Soviet Union, is not true socialism, not true communism. It was capitalism that calls
fallacy.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
And every time I heard about it, everyone always points out the true no true socialism. Like, found a fallacy. There you go.
Because it's the same bullshit when we try to explain to libertarians about Ethiopia when they say that's not a true anarchy, because they don't fucking exist and they never will. That's the whole point. Take it really human nature.
Joe came loaded for bear this month.
I mean, basically, and this is the reason why I hate both extremes, because they're basically two sides of the same bubble-headed coin. It's the same bullshit that if human nature didn't exist, everything would be perfect. Well,
human nature is adaptable.
You know, but here in the real world, we have to still deal with shit. So,
yeah.
You know.
Well, I'm falling for an idealized world, but I will participate in the world I have as much as I can to try to like move it towards there. If it happens slowly, sure. It's not. The capitalist is not going to go away in my lifetime. I know that. So I will fight for regulated capitalism. I will vote for that. So I will pressure my candidates, and my government officials to get closer to get rid of rent, get closer to universal basic income, get closer to like single payer healthcare, get closer to like where you don't have to have a job in order to get the benefits of like being an American or coming to America or living or being born into this world, not just this country.
Yeah. I and honestly, like that, what you just described, like the world you describe and that you want to see happen eventually is exactly the kind of world I want. And I mean, so I have like no argument with that at all. And I mean, I kind of agree with Joe that maybe it's a little too idealistic, but at the same time, it's like, if you don't reach for it, you're never going to get anywhere close to it. And as long as people are still willing to participate in the system as it is and not just throw up their hands and say, well, I'll just wait until everything is just the way I want it. You know, as long as you're willing to get your hands dirty and say, you know what, everything sucks. I don't like this. I wish things were different. But since this is the reality and there's nothing I can do as an individual to just throw everything over, I'm going to try to do as much good as I can within the system. I think that's about the best that anybody can do.
Sure.
You know?
Okay, what if you throw your hands up and become a cannibal instead of doing anything?
There are criminalists that just want to throw away technology. I don't agree with those people.
Well, and that's what I say, because I've been yelling at Geek. I just want to, just to be nice. I in my heart, if I could give myself over to some sort of utopian system, I am a techno syndicalist. So I'm not that far away from where you want to be. But I'm practical, because that's why I'm an engineer. So
just remember, everybody, that Joe does automation, which means he's the one who took everybody's job.
That's the funny part. That's the funny part, because everyone's right now. That's the new boogeyman. Dude, I'm hiring. I have such a hard time finding qualified candidates. If I want to import people from another country, I can get 20 resumes tomorrow. So Americans, get jobs. There's jobs in automation.
People need to take care of the automated shit too.
Exactly.
Not everyone,
because we're busy and we're hiring. Right. And that's the thing that's so frustrating, because it's like, look, people have a valid point, but on the other hand, if every time I hear somebody say, tell somebody, you don't bother with college or just go to, major, don't get an education in something that's, for your profession. I want to punch them, because I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? People can't feed themselves on Yates, so but learn programmable logic controllers and SCADA systems, and I got a job for you, and it pays really well.
Some people are definitely qualified for. Some people can definitely do that. Not everyone. So there's that. But there's probably other fields that they can probably work to. But most of us have already that well, or have to pay the rent, and so maybe you work 40 hours a week for the standard one job, and then may have to work on another job as well. And those people are just so tired at the end of the day. So sometimes they'll forget to call the senators and call the congressmen. So there's also that element as well.
But what you also have to remember, though, is the fact that most of the jobs that are out there right now are not being paid at the level that they should be paid at. Again, because the guys at the top are hoarding. If you can level that playing field, you go a long way towards getting towards what Geek and Joe were talking about.
That's right, and that's why I'm having more and more contempt though for the people who don't participate, because there's way more of us than there are of them.
Yeah,
and
if we could just all show up.
So the reason why we don't have, I mean, because basically we allow them with their flashy slogans and commercials to dupe us and to lull us into complacency. To not so that's one thing I will say for you. You got heart and you're active, and that's great. Because the people who sit behind and do nothing and just complain, I have nothing but contempt for them. Because we could have everything, we could have all that shit. But we don't.
Yeah. The primary problems are that you've got people who are absolutely determined to hang on to what they've got, and they weren't going to give it up. They're going to hold on to it to the evil grins. And you got the other guys who are so apathetic that they think, fuck it, it isn't worth going for. And how you shake either side out of that? Hey, anybody got ideas? I'm open to them.
Well, I was sorry. Was somebody else going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Well, I just it's weird that what Lauren said just kind of dovetails with what I was going to say, because I just had a thought, Joe, and everybody else. Like we have this notion, especially mostly when we talk about like political discussions, like you should be open to hearing ideas from people you disagree with. You should be willing to engage with people who have very different viewpoints than you. And so often we are sort of trained to apply that to people who are on the extreme other side, and we see that demonstrated by like, oh, look, there's a liberal talking to, a far right neo-Nazi in everything but name. Look, isn't that wonderful that they can have a discussion and share ideas? And it's like, what if instead of wasting time talking to right-wing extremists and bigots and people who just want to kill everybody, what if we take that idea of let's be open to other ideas and other viewpoints
and devour them, cannibalism,
and talk to people who agree with us on 75% of stuff.
Thank you.
But don't agree with us on everything. So maybe like a Democrat, but he's more of a centrist Democrat, or he's a little bit to the left of center, but not as left as you are, and engage them and engage those differences and say, let's find what we can agree on and actually move, because the other stuff is just performative. I'm sorry. A left winger talking to a Nazi, that's not going to accomplish anything other than making people feel better and saying, oh, isn't it great that we can engage with people who are on the other side? But if you can engage with someone, if you can engage with someone who disagrees with you, but who is still mostly in your hemisphere and say, let's figure out what we can agree on and accomplish something, that might actually be useful.
Absolutely.
Steve, take a look at what happened Friday between Jeff Flake and I can't remember the name of the Democrat, but the whole thing that came out of the fact that, hey, these guys work together, and what do we get? An FBI investigation.
Yeah.
Yes. Wowie zowie.
Right. Well, and along with both of your points, or actually all three of your points, where's it going? Fuck. Okay. So you think about like for instance, the social justice issues.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So start adding, because we get too proprietary, because I call it the victim Olympics. It's like, well, who has it worse? Is it black people? Is it Jews? Is it women? Is it LGBT? Like, who gives a fuck? Like, we mostly need the same things. So like, okay. So and we like to call ourselves allies, but are we really? Because basically an alliance is an equal partnership of people with their own sovereignty and ideas, but with a common goal.
I don't want to call myself an ally. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I don't either, because I don't think anyone really is, or not enough people are.
It's a verb, not a noun.
So, but you take women. Okay, women are what, 51, almost 52% of the population.
Thereabouts.
Then you add non-white men. That's like another 18%, 22%, somewhere in there. And then you throw in poor white men, and you throw in any remaining LGBT people that we've missed somehow that didn't fall into one of those other categories. You throw them in. That's like what, like 80% of the population, 85. We could get everything. So if we all said, hey, look, we what do we all need? We all need a place to live that's safe. We all need food that's nutritional. We all need an education. We all need whether or not, I mean, and to Geek's point, I won't say we all need a job, but we all need some means of sustaining ourselves. And we need at least some portion of us to produce all the goods that we need to consume and all that.
I'm not against work.
So we all need that, and we all need to be respected as individuals, not necessarily our actions or ideas, but certainly as there should be some minimum basic human respect. We all need health care. So we all need those things. Every one of us. There's not a person on this planet. Now, some people have better access to that than others. So and the solution for any given person may be a little different because the way we got into where we are now, the histories are a little different. But if we all got on board with that, but we don't. So what ends up happening is we fractionate and we get into the, what we're saying, like, oh, well, you're into this, but not that, or you're helping you want my help on that, but you're not helping me on this. So and that happens way more on our side because we're more.
Well,
you're asking for a meeting of the minds, Joe. You're asking for a meeting of the minds, Joe, and I think you know as well as I do how incredibly difficult getting that to happen is, especially when one side is, as I said before, utterly determined not to realize such a thing.
Well, yeah, but we do it to ourselves to a degree.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, look,
we do it to our side. Yeah,
just look within feminism alone. I mean, it's funny. The anti-feminists love to attack feminism as this horrible, terrible thing, but it's not a monolith. There's all sorts of factions and different schools of thought within feminism alone that can't get along. And again, and don't, and again, instead of saying, okay, well, all right, we agree on maybe 80%, so let's focus on that, and we can ticker over the other stuff. At a later time.
Honestly, most serious political or social movements that have been around for any length of time that have accomplished anything are like that. I mean, the Black Civil Rights Movement, there are different factions. There are people who have
the Black Panthers.
Different ideas. The classic, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Right. There were some people who said, you know what, we need to be more active. We need to do more direct action. And then there are other people who are saying, well, we need to be peaceful. And there are people who had different opinions than that.
But Malcolm X and Black Panthers did serve a purpose because MLK was able to go to Lyndon B. Johnson and said, listen, if you don't work with me, you're going to have to deal with them in a way. And they're going to take it much more further, which is why if you do not allow peaceful reform possible, you make violent revolution inevitable.
Oh, exactly. Well, that's the thing. That's what I've said to people in the negative reactions that people have had to both the Me Too and the gun control thing. I'm like, well, you can accept a reasonable solution now, or you can have an unreasonable solution forced upon you later.
The Fram oil filter syndrome. You can pay me now, or you can pay me later.
But yet under capitalism, we're going on too long, and I talk too much. So
I want to. But by the way, the Black Panthers convinced Ronald Reagan to sign gun control in California. So that's the power of
shocking amazing.
But I've been thinking about this ever since we started talking about taxes, and it's something that one of those things that just sort of allows me to chart the evolution of my political thought over the years. Because we were watching The Twilight Zone a couple of days ago, and we watched the episode "The Man in the Bottle," where the shopkeepers discover a genie. Right. And it's like, and obviously you're supposed to sympathize with the shopkeepers because they're running this failing antique store, and they're like a middle-aged couple, and they don't have any money, and they find this genie in a bottle, and of course the guy wishes for $1 million, and you're like, oh, good for them, they got $1 million, they can pay off their debts. And of course he's such a nice guy. The first thing he does is he starts handing out money to his neighbors, and the people that come into his shop who try to hawk things to get some extra cash. He's like, here you go, take whatever you need. And then the guy from the government shows up, the tax collector, and he's like, and he does his calculation, and he's like, oh, guess what, you owe the government $900,000 in taxes. And because the guy has already given so much away, that's basically everything. He has to give the government $900,000, and he's already given so much away that he gets to keep like none of the $1 million. And of course you're supposed to sympathize with the guy and think, oh, that sucks. How could the government do that to the poor guy? He lost all his money. And that's how I felt about it for most of my life. And I watched it the other night, and I still love that episode. It's a great episode. But I thought, I mean, he got the money from a genie.
Yeah.
Like what should why what entitles him to keep the $1 million that he got from a wish? Like if the government comes in and says we're going to tax that and we're going to use it to pay for social programs, like I'm sorry, I can't feel that bad for the guy, seeing as how he got the money from a fucking genie in a bottle. It's not like it was his money that he worked his whole life for and it's his life savings and
that is exactly how I feel about capital gains.
Yeah, it's like it rained from the ceiling. It literally rained from the ceiling.
And here's the other thing too, Steve. It also was a dishonest representation because, of course, since he gave away X amount of dollars, his tax bill would have been less anyway.
Right, so, they would take that into account.
75%, 90%.
Yeah, the shame there is there's even a limit on what you can contribute. Charitable contributions. They put a lid on that. So, I mean, after a certain point, you can't get away with it anymore. Yeah. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Unless you Mitt Romney with $14 million.
Please.
Oh, Mitt Romney. Isn't it awful that things have gotten so bad that people are actually looking at Mitt Romney and thinking, he wasn't so bad.
Well, broken record twice a day.
Like, at least he wasn't openly racist. Yeah, true.
He was a functional adult.
He was a functional adult.
I retweeted something. He's like, wait a minute. I retweeted Mitt Romney. What is the world coming to? Well, it was Charlottesville, so that's what happened. That's what caused me to retweet.
Steve, it's even worse than that. When you get nostalgia about W.
Oh, God.
There you go. I mean,
remember,
there is nostalgia about W.
The thing to remember is with the W's and the Mitts is that because things are so awful, they're in the position. Yeah, they're in the position where they can say reasonable sounding things and make everybody go, yeah, that's right. But they don't ever put their money where their mouth is. I mean, I have a thing. I have a thing in tomorrow's video about how W. Bush has been calling the swing votes in the Senate to try and get them to confirm Kavanaugh, and it's like, okay, so
votes for Kavanaugh.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, so what do you think of him now? People who are like, who we did.
He's still a Republican, so that's why I still think it's still Republican. It's still about my team winning, and that's
one thing that Lauren said before that was really key, and this is a problem, and it's not just on the political right, although I would say more so, but it's on the political left as well. Is the idea that life is a zero-sum game, because basically, I used to describe it in the past as like the right wing thinks, well, in order to give somebody something, you have to take it from somebody else, and then the left thinks, in order to give somebody something, you have to take it from somebody else.
Let's take it.
Yeah. But basically, what it comes down to is this idea that there's only so many pieces of pie, and if I give you some pie, then there's less pie for everybody else. But the fact is that the pie can grow or shrink depending on what we do. So so what it is if you do it correctly, you're giving more pieces of pie from an ever increasing pie, and that's actually, when you're talking about capitalism, that's actually what a value-based system can do. Is that you can actually increase the size of the pie if depending on how you do it. Right. So that and even in a situation of limited resources, that you can still generate more pie. So people don't understand that, because again, it's not intuitive. They think, well, there's so much pie. How can because they confuse wealth and currency. They're not the same thing.
I'm not sure about that, but that's
it's a very hard thing to break people of. So that's why where Geek's at. Again, to be fair to Geek, I would love to be in that world, but we're not even to the point where we can even understand that basic part of current economics to get to, that's in another realm of possibility.
Right, because the Overton window, another thing about the Overton window, not only of like where it is and where's the normal and what's the unacceptable, the framework of the window, where what's acceptable is only in this frame, and what's outside of it is not. So we cannot stretch that window to be like not a window, essentially.
Right. So that's the thing. So if we can get to the point where we recognize that You know, it's not zero sum. And even as far as the transactional part, I actually would say everything is transactional, but it's not all about money. If we start recognizing that there is value in helping one another and having society that's restorative and recuperative and nurturing
and self-sustaining,
that we all actually benefit from that.
Yeah, and here's one more point, and this goes to Geek's point that he put in the comment there about, you know, increasing the size of the pie. I mean, it is a zero. In the final analysis, you know, Earth is a zero-sum game. You know, and yeah, maybe we get to the stars one of the days, we start tapping into that. But the point is, I don't think we've even come close to finding out, you know, the limits of the zero sum yet. You know, we can still increase the pie, and in so doing, you know, allow more people to be enriched, allow more people to get the benefits and so on. But we haven't really worked that hard at increasing the size of the pie, and that is really where the focus needs to be.
Yeah, well, because it's like it's all for the markets in order to like increase profits as much as possible.
Like I said, the concentration of wealth actually shrinks the pie.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the rich people that are the 1% that are getting all the benefit right now, they're getting a bigger and bigger piece of an ever shrinking pie.
Agreed.
Well, I'm gonna call an end to this and go have some pie.
I could really go for some pie.
For some reason, I just really want a cup of
coffee.
Yeah. Anyway, this has been fun. Sorry we got started a little bit late, but if you've been watching this and you think this looks like fun, this is something I do once a month with my wonderful Patreon patrons who allow me to do what I do on this channel. And all you have to do is be a patron, and you get access to the patrons only feed on the Patreon page. And if you're one of the first people to click the link and you can get in before it fills up, you can do this once a month.
I don't think it filled up this month either.
I don't think it did. Yeah.
I think we had 8 max.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you know,
of course, we spent the entire time arguing about capitalism and socialism.
Yeah, exactly.
Increase the size of the pie.
So if it looks like fun, and if you like what I do on YouTube, you can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to help out. And obviously, all of you who are here with me today, thank you so much for being patrons, and thank you so much for hanging out with me and making this such a fun way to spend an hour. And
this was fun. I guess so. I enjoyed myself.
I know. Well, who don't like pie? Come on.
I mean, hey, pie, geek.
I don't care if
I prefer cake. But
I don't care if you're a capitalist or a communist or whatever you are. If you don't like a piece of pie every once in a while, what was that?
The cake is a lie, though.
The cake is a lie.
Capitalism is a lie.
If you don't like a piece of pie every once in a while, I don't know what to say to you. But anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for joining me, everybody here, and we'll do this again next month. Bye.